This graph I took from a slide I got from Office of Public Instruction, and I just inserted over to the right the governor's budget. Now you can see coming across the elementary basic, that's how much we get for an elementary building, then a middle school, our junior high, and then the high school. And so for the year we're in right now, which is fiscal year 2011, $258,000. For 2012, it falls back to $253,000 without any increase, because we're operating on ARRA funds, federal stimulus dollars. They've picked up the difference. Under the governor's proposal, this is where you read and hear differently on the news and the newspapers. If you go to the elementary basic, you can see $20,238 is the governor's budget, what we would get for elementary basic. That is lower than what we're getting in 2011, but it is higher than $22,805, which is what it would be without anything from the legislature, because 3% of our funds this year are coming from stimulus dollars, our 3% increase. So when the governor says we're increasing funding for schools, he's saying we're increasing funding from schools if we didn't do any action from the legislature. It is not an increase from what we're operating on this year. It's still a decrease. And I know I probably had 4 emails back and forth with the writers from the Michael writes for the Helena. Was it? There's a Johnson and a Michael, I'll think of these as coming anyway, email back and forth about their 2 articles in the Saturday Missoulian last Friday, and then again on Sunday. And then he finally saw where we're going. He was going to Lance, back to me, and he agreed he would do a follow-up article within the next week, expressing some of the concerns we had about the information coming out of the governor's office. Because I said it's given a false perception to the communities that they're getting more money from schools than we had this year, and that's not true. And he finally agreed on that. And here again you can see the fiscal year 9, fiscal year 10, fiscal year 11, which we're operating on. It's going upwards. Now it's going backwards. So that's fiscal year 2012. So there's a graph there that's in your paper as well that shows with the funding that's coming, we're going backwards, because we're losing the stimulus dollars and ARRA dollars. Now this is a pretty serious statement I made, but I'll stand by it. The legislature robs the school districts, continually robs school districts in the state of Montana. Almost all new taxation that the public votes on is with the perception it's going to schools. Check the origin of the state property tax. The state property tax was put in because it was going to fund schools. Over the years, a piece of that has been taken away and has been put into other governmental agencies. When you look at the lottery, look at the history of that. The Lottery Act was passed in 1986. Why? To lower property taxes, because it was going to go into Teachers Retirement System, TRS. Teachers Retirement System costs the taxpayers money. It's a permissive levy, it's a retirement fund. So to lower the amount of local taxes, they said the lottery, the profits and taxes from the lottery would help reduce the taxes that people pay for TRS. Then it comes back in 1989 and it was moved to the state equalization aid for schools. Now we're equalizing things into the GTB. And in 1991, the legislature moved the profits to the Montana General Fund. So it started with schools, and over all those years, it moves into the general fund to be distributed elsewhere within the state. Otter Creek, $81 million. When they were trying to get that approved and negotiate a deal with the contractors from out of state to come in eastern Montana to go in with the oil and gas reserves, what was the big thing? Oh, it's going to go to schools. We're going to give that money to the schools. Yes, they did. The $81 million goes to schools, and then reduced the equivalent $81 million from our school general funds. So the Otter Creek goes in, they pulled $81 million out that the state was giving us, so that they can use the $81 million for other projects that the state government wants to do. The ARA create jobs in schools, 30.7 million. That came out, you know, in the midsummer, reading about that. I asked Gail, I said, have you got anything in? Are we getting this money to help save jobs in our school? We never saw anything. Once again, when it came in, the ARA fund started out at 3%, was going to be our raise. They took 2% of it with the first federal stimulus dollars. That left 1% that the state funded. Guess what they did with the 30.7 million? They took that and put that in for that 1% increase they gave us. So then all 3% of our increase for our current year came from federal stimulus dollars. And so we didn't see one dime of the 30.7 million, but you can sit back and say, we gave the schools 81 million from Otter Creek, 30.7 million from ARA, and we haven't seen one dime of it. And now the quality educator payment, 76 million proposed to take from oil and gas companies, that's going in to replace money that the state has provided under the quality educator at about $3,000 a teacher. Now, if the legislators don't approve the recommendations to take from those counties, where are they going to come up with it? Or are we going to lose another $3,000 a teacher from our general budget next year? We don't know. And you can cite many examples of how schools, because schools are kind of like grandma, apple pie, you know, everything's nice and rosy about them. So if it's going to schools, we'll support it. And then we'll sneak it back out and give it elsewhere. Now within our district, that is for this year, the budget year we are under. And you can see the elementary district on the left and the high school district on the right. It comes out to about 77% in the elementary and 70% in the high school. Not for salaries and health insurance on the bottom. And Don so astutely said, you know, he's pretty accurate on it. He looked at it and he says, well, the difference in A and B is almost our sports program. The difference between what we get for an elementary student and a high school student is almost the increase that it costs for athletics in high school versus a grade school. And then, of course, you have your industrial arts and your home ec and a lot of the other ones who have a higher rate of equipment and expenditures. Now, for 11-12, because our students are going down and we have been making cuts of staff, those percentages, I would expect the 77 and 70 to probably approach 80% on the elementary campus and 73, 74% on the high school campus for salaries. And then the activities and utilities. Insurance, 11%. Man, I should go back, what it used to, I wouldn't want to go back and look at it. But it wouldn't have been 11%, and all of you know the same thing in your own budgets. Now within the sports, an average sports program runs us about $12,000 to $16,000. And you can see, and this was for 09-10 actual expenditures on that year. And it shows you what the costs are. That's without gated, which is a big difference. Because when you go down and you see your salaries and the total costs, some of those don't bring in any revenue. And so, you know, there's no money coming in at all from the spring sports. When you get into track and you get into softball and into golf, nothing comes back in from revenue from the spectators. And then the ones consistently that cost the most, if you take expenditures out and revenue in, would be softball, wrestling, and track, because they always go to state. You're always going to take kids to Billings for state wrestling. This year, though, it's in Hamilton because the Metro had some problems. It'll be back there. But there's very little revenue comes into that. Track's the same way. You're always going to send a group to state track. And we've always had teams go to state softball and sometimes spend more days. Softball's probably cost more for state than any other sport because they've had snow and rain, and they've had to sometimes go on Sunday and Monday and back there. And we've always had good teams, so they've always stayed around late in the tournament and ended up spending 2, 3, 4 nights. And the parents just had to foot that bill out of theirs. Laquita was going like this, knowing her $100 a night motel bill many years on that. So those are the expensive ones in the revenue, and that's what our athletics, how we spend in there. We haven't funded golf for quite a few years as cheerleaders. We haven't funded that. We get the golf, we let them use our school vans occasionally. If the roads are good and they need them, they'll take the vans on the road, and it cuts down on that with those. And the cheerleaders, usually if we can, we'll help out come tournament time. As far as their uniforms, they're on their own. Their sponsors don't get paid or a dime or anything on that. And then coming up in January, we'll hit the other major funds: transportation, retirement, adult ed, tech, flex, tuition, debt service, building reserve, food, athletics, high school. And then down in there, at the last one, special ed, federal and state grants, potential general fund deficits for 2011-12, and then phase 2 will start on balancing the budget for next year. And I think the latest that I've worked through as of now, we're $231,000 in the red for next year. And my best estimate at this point could be 300, could be 150. But it's in the neighborhood of $231,000. The A and B loss, and with the governor budget, was about $48,000. Steps and lanes for education, it's a catch thing. We're really proud of our staff, but we're an expensive staff. We're a well-educated staff. We have more master's degree than ever in the school district. Most of our teachers in the high school have a master's degree or just completing a master's degree. And for those who don't understand payment in school business, BAs over here, you get 10 more semester credits, you get a raise, another 10 more credits, you get a raise, 10 more credits, you get a raise. You work your way over to your MA and you get your raises, so you get a raise every time you move over. And within this district, my memory, if I remember, Gail, we computed it, I think out of, it was almost like 28 and 12. I think 28 of our teachers were at a master's degree or a BA4, and only 12 of them are not at the BA4. So thank heavens for the Beckets of the world who we can afford. But we do want you to get education, so it's a catch. You're trying to balance a budget, but at the same time, you want their inquisitive mind to go back and become a better teacher for your children and our children on that. So when we get down to balancing, like I said, that those figures now that I've got around $235,000, $240,000, could be 150, could be 350, depending on what happens at the legislature. You have yellow sheets over here. If you think of anything, write them down, get them to me, go into the webpage, email me your questions. Be happy to answer them. Any feedback on how to improve it in the future? The 2 meetings, you have those, but they'll be in January. Hopefully by the end of January, we'll have a better idea what's happening in the legislature. But usually we're into April before we even have anything how it's going to happen. So no problem. Thank you for coming again, and stay warm.